your body thinks that it's still sunlight.
Entrepreneurship. You cannot build a business without having people around you that not only are part of your team.
About is they purchase this sofa and they take it with them across the city, across Toronto.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Restless Millennial Podcast, the voice of the motivated youth. Today I'm here with Maryl Eva, who is the Chief of Staff of Empower Performance, which is a kind of a mentorship program for millennials. And so I guess that's as much as I'll say, and I'll turn it over to Maryl and tell her to let us know what Empower Performance is.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Stefan.
No problem.
So we are a talent incubator, and we focus on building personalized development plans for millennials that are data-driven and highly strategic.
Personalized development plans. Now, what does that mean if you break that down?
Yeah, so basically, since they're personalized, it looks a little bit different for each person.
Right.
So, for example, mine is building my strategic plan to reach my vision, which is to be a CEO of a company one day. And in my version of my strategic plan, I'm using it in order to make better decisions, because I have a lot as a co-founder of a company. I have a lot of decisions that I need to make, and I have influence in this company. So I use my talent development plan to make better decisions. So I organize it with what I need to have based on my data and my traits, my defaults. And then I have things that I should avoid. I have what are gaps in my experience and knowledge. And then I have my objectives as well as my values.
So how did you kind of get involved in this kind of thing? Can you just take us back into the past and, where did this idea come from? I mean, I know you joined the company through somebody else. Can you just tell us that story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So I go back a little bit further, even to high school. So I was one of those annoying kids who never studied but did really well and was on every team and, overachiever without really trying all that hard. And when I went into university, I thought, medicine is perfect. I'm going to go into biomed. Ended up failing horribly, lost all my self-confidence, all my confidence in my ability was just completely shot. So switched to psychology, found that I really loved it. Went out, obviously didn't get a job in that field because almost nobody does. And ended up going to a company and working in the accounting department. Was happy there, but I kind of had made my peace with being sort of middle management.
So you went from, you got a job in accounting from a psychology degree.
Yeah, actually I started I was bartending, and I started as a temp because one of the regulars there knew I wasn't really looking to work during the night anymore. Got me as a temp for data entry, and I was really enthusiastic. It was my first sort of brush with corporate, and loved the corporate idea and loved the numbers and that sort of thing. So I got promoted very quickly to working in accounting. So total zag, but I'm forever grateful for that experience, just giving me a little bit of context.
So if we go into your more recent history, how did you get involved in Empower Performance?
When I was working in accounting, my dad passed away very suddenly, and I realized, I needed a change. I needed to do something. I needed to be basically better than middle management and sort of, explore what he saw my potential to be. So I ended up going to the George Brown Sport and Event Marketing postgraduate program in Toronto. And one of my professors that I met very first week was Nancy Spotton, and she taught applied business communication. And she built confidence in us and our ability to speak, and I've always been extremely outgoing, and her words, no use for you in this class. But we bonded over our mutual love for psychology, and I gave her a book on neuroplasticity, and we bonded that way intellectually, stayed in touch over our internship. And then in the fall of last year, so 1 year ago, she got me into Canada Sports Hall of Fame to run their VIP pre-function. And what I didn't know was that it was sort of the final step in an interview process. And after that, she asked if I wanted to start a company that focused on unlocking the potential of millennials.
What an interesting interview.
Yeah.
You have to run a whole event.
Yeah.
That's probably the most challenging interview I've ever heard of.
If you know Nancy at all, she's all about adding pressure when you're young.
Yeah, it's a good model to have, right? So if you look at Empower Performance, compare it to other mentorship programs, what makes it different than the oversaturation of mentorship programs that there are out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of noise out there, and while we appreciate what everyone else is doing in the coaching sphere, where we focus is training leaders young. We focus on training them with data, and we focus on training them with pressure. So the one thing that really, really makes us different is the tool that we use. It's called TAIS, which stands for the Attentional and Interpersonal Style Inventory, and it's the best psychometric evaluation out there. It has exclusively been used for decades by Navy SEALs, by SWAT teams, by Olympians, and by CEOs. And we decided and got permission that we wanted to go after a younger generation to build the next generation of leaders.
So you only work with young people, with millennials?
We work with anyone who has an open mind about millennials or an open mind about themselves. So a lot of our clients are maybe elder millennials, you could call them.
And what is an elder millennial?
Like 35-ish.
Okay.
So we work with people who are -2, so second-year students, to +7 in their career. But of course, anybody who wants to be involved with us is more than welcome to. They just have to have an open mind about millennials.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if we go back a little bit, what is a psychometric evaluation? What kind of questions are in that?
Great question. So a psychometric evaluation is not a personality test. So we get the question a lot, is it like Myers-Briggs?
Yeah.
And it's not at all. So Myers-Briggs is simplistic. It's easy to get a false positive on. It's not scientifically validated. So TAIS, and there are others out there that are scientifically validated as well. It asks questions that actually gain insight into your traits and your characteristics as opposed to your personality.
Can you give me an example of a few questions that you'd ask?
So the questions actually have been developed, and I love that you're focusing on the questions because it is what makes TAIS so special. The creator of TAIS has obsessed over building the best questions to get the best results for the last 50 years.
Right.
So the actual questions themselves, there's 144.
Okay.
Each question relates to multiple scales, so it makes it nearly impossible to get a false positive or negative.
Right.
But they're all situational questions, and basically the outcome of it is 20 different data points. So one example would be how you look at the world. So you can be high in awareness, so basically your intuition and trusting that you can interpret the world around you. Analytical conceptual, which is your ability to see the big picture and strategize. And action focus, which is being tactical and detail oriented. So of those, you are highest in 1, which means that that's your default awareness style, attentional style. So for me, for example, I'm highest in analytical conceptual, which means that under pressure, I default to being strategic and looking at the big picture.
Right.
If their highest was action focused, they would default to seeing the detail and staying tactical.
Right.
So there's benefits and we don't really say weaknesses, but there's benefits to each one, and there's things to be aware if you're particularly low in one. So mine is action focus that I'm lowest in, and I recently had to put 15 appointments in my CEO's calendar, and it took me 2 hours, and I was so stressed out because it's not where I go under pressure.
Right. So my question is, how does the program kind of work? Do you sit down with a person and you'll figure out their strengths and weaknesses and say okay, this is what you need to work on based on this data? Is that kind of how it works? What's the process like?
Yeah, so basically, since we focus on personalized development plans, it's different with each of our clients. So first we do corporate clients, and we can talk more about that after if you'd like. But for individuals, which is really our bread and butter, our focus, we collect a little bit of qualitative data. We get to know them a little bit outside of TAIS first, just through a self-reflection survey. It takes 10 minutes. And then the client will do the test, which is 144 questions, like I said. It takes about 20 minutes to do. And then after, they get a report sent to them and a 1-page snapshot of all of their data points. From there, we have Nancy. She's a trained coach. I'm not a trained coach. So Nancy will sit down with them and go through each of the data points as it relates to their current context. So if somebody's a job seeker, for example, Nancy can talk about each of the scales and where they might fit, if that's their motivation for coming to see us. If somebody wants to be a better leader, you can talk about each of the data points and how that it creates their leadership profile, that sort of thing. And then from there, we do actionable things like creating the strategic plans. We can build resumes, we do LinkedIn, and if it's in corporate, we can run interaction reports, which outlines how people communicate and how they can amplify their relationship.
So once you've done all this with a client, like, do you focus more on their improving their weaknesses or building on their strengths, and why?
It's a little bit of both. So we don't, like I said, we don't focus on the weaknesses, but there are definitely things that clients come to us and they want to change. So one of the data points is self-critical, for example. So we'll have clients come to us and want to work on their self-critical. So if that is the major thing that they come to us wanting to work on, definitely we'll focus on that and we'll provide strategies to decrease their self-critical and increase their self-confidence. So if it's something like getting a job, we'll focus on highlighting their strengths, especially because a lot of our clients come to us not really knowing where their fit is in the corporate world. So that is an awesome opportunity to focus on their strengths and, guide them towards a position that would be well suited for them.
And how have the results been? Is there one particular situation where someone came in, they were looking for a job, that you did the assessment with them and they were able to find a job that they loved in their field?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I met with she was a client and now we consider her a strategist consultant. So her name is Stevie. And I met with her last night, actually, and we had a great conversation. She has a job now that she loves, and she's taking a little bit of time off school because we've gone through this process together, and she sort of realized maybe it's not for her. Maybe she she was in poli-sci, and she said maybe she fits a little bit better in corporate. So she's trying that out. And we had an awesome conversation where she just said, she would have been clouded by self-critical before, and she's just able to see the forest through the trees and focus on what makes her great instead of what holds her back.
So not focusing on her weaknesses, but building on the strengths.
Yeah, absolutely.
And why is that important?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Why is that important to focus less on your weaknesses and instead build on your strengths?
So building on your strengths, especially when you look at it in this data point, it's things that you naturally do. It's things that you default to. So if you're looking, Stevie, for example, and she's one of my favorite cases, she's 99.9% analytical conceptual. So she's already strategic all the time, and she will perform amazingly in a high strategic, high pressure environment. So instead of trying to get Stevie to go somewhere and work on the detail, we can give her strategic plans to get better at the detail. So it is focusing on her quote unquote weaknesses, but it's using her default settings to get better at it.
Yeah, I feel like it would make more sense to focus on your strengths because, why it takes more effort and time to focus on something that you're bad at than it does to improve something that you're already pretty good at. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It makes perfect sense. So another question I have is, what advice would you have for someone who doesn't really know what their biggest strengths are and they're trying to figure that out? I obviously if they sign up for your program, they'll get some more advice on that, but just based on your own personal experience, do you have anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing is, if we look at the power of two, so not staying in your own head, communicating with other people, gaining a little bit of perspective about how they see you and what their strengths are. And this is really important. So when I say the power of two, it's not about going to your best friend and saying, what do you love about me? Right? It's going to someone who's going to be a little bit more objective, who's going to kick your ass, and you can provide a little bit of perspective about who you are. A coach is obviously a great example for that, especially a coach with data, but your boss or somebody like that as well can be very helpful. Another thing for your strength is to really find and spend some time thinking about what your sweet spot is. So that's a Nancy Spotton quote, find your sweet spot, and to find what makes your heart sing. So it can be something seemingly inconsequential. So for me, for example, when Nancy asked us in class what makes her heart sing, the first thing I thought of was crime documentaries. I am obsessed. On the way here, I listened to one. I just love them. And we all kind of laughed, but then I thought about it, and what about crime documentaries do I love? It's gaining insight into the human condition and focusing on what makes us each unique
Right.
and that sort of thing. And as it turns out, that identifying that made it very easy for me to make the decision to work at Empower, because it's focusing on the human condition, and I get to do it every single day, and it completely works with my strengths of being highly intuitive and highly strategic as well.
So would you say someone should kind of look at the things that they like and just kind of figure out why they like those things?
Yeah.
And that would help them get some more insight on what their strengths are?
Yeah, absolutely. So it might seem super silly. It might be,
Like, what would you say they should do? Like, make a list of these things?
Yeah,
or kind of
absolutely.
Just, like, really dive into it?
Yeah, definitely. And it can be as silly as you want, right?
Yeah.
It can be, we had a speaker come into Nancy's class yesterday, Joe Jackman, reinventionist, and he said his thing that makes his heart sing is change. So that's
Change, like money.
no, no. He told the story of how he went to a protest when he was a kid. So he's on like the precipice of change, and that's what really excited
So like
him.
physical when things change.
Yes, like change in the world.
Because you were saying like funny things, so I assumed like it was actual change.
Yeah, maybe it's money, but he was saying how change is awesome, and that's a rather profound, not money, but change in the world. It's a very profound thing that makes his heart sing. But it might be animals, right? Dive down. Why do you love animals? Is it because you like taking care of people and you like being in control? You like a leadership role? It seems like they don't fit, but they do.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I've never really thought about my strengths that way. Mm-hmm. Like thinking about the things that I like in life and kind of diving into why I like them. Yeah. That's interesting. I think I'm going to do that myself.
Yeah, definitely.
You guys should do it too. So let's get on to the topic of leadership, because that's something you kind of help young people build. You help young people build leadership skills as well. So what are some ways in which young people can become better leaders? And do you have a lot of young people who come into your program and say, I want to be a better leader, to get ahead in the corporate world or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll start that. I could talk about the leadership crisis for hours, but one of the biggest things is that we're training leaders way too late. Mm-hmm. And, we typically in society get promoted to leadership at around 33. You're in a manager position or maybe a director position, but we don't get leadership training until we're about 42. So there's this almost decade gap in leadership training. And what happens there is, what happens is people are promoted to leadership because they're excellent in what they do. So they're subject matter experts. They've spent, a decade or so honing their craft, and they're excellent. They get promoted to leadership, which is something that they've never had time to work on.
Develop.
So instead of being strategic and being a good empathetic leader who understands their team, they are now in a position where they can't do the thing that they're really good at anymore. And it causes, and of course not for everybody, but just what we've noticed, is that it causes anxiety, it causes them to hide, it causes them to not seek out feedback because all of a sudden they're not in a position where they are comfortable.
So what is Empower doing to change that?
So we're training them young. We're starting young, and we focus on the leadership meta competency of self-awareness. Okay. So what self-awareness... Yes, I know. I had to practice a few times saying that. What self-awareness does is it increases your confidence, decreases your self-critical, makes you more receptive to feedback, makes you more collaborative with your team, and ultimately leads to making better informed decisions. Mm-hmm. So a couple tips as a millennial to be a better leader is to know yourself completely and your limitations, to get a coach, and like I said, not your best friend. It needs to be someone who will kick your ass and keep you accountable. And also just understand the importance of an authentic, personalized experience.
Right. But what if someone's on a budget and they don't have the money to get a coach, right? Like, what are some ways? Mm-hmm. Actually, if you don't mind me asking, like, what is the price point like in terms of Empower, in terms of a session with you guys? Great
question. So for students, we have a deal on right now for $100, which includes the assessment and then an hour with the master coach. And then for individuals who aren't students or recent grads, I mean, if you graduated a couple years ago, we're not going to be picky. For people who are not just fresh out of school, it's $250, and then we have a couple other packages, like it's an extra $100 if you want to add resume and LinkedIn help, and we have a monthly plan as well and an annual plan.
So for the $100 one, what does that get you? Just the one-page report you were talking about, and then you sit down for an hour with I forget the name of your
Nancy.
CEO, Nancy.
Yes.
So is that what is included in the $100 plan?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So but you still get the full psychometric analysis.
You do, yes.
Right?
So you get the one-page report, and then you get a very long report that goes through to the scale, so that it gives you a little bit of a little more information before or after your strategy session with
Okay,
Nancy.
and that's really interesting, because I assume if you'd want to get like a session with most like mentorships or coaches, like it would cost a lot of money.
Oh,
and that's
yeah.
why it's really interesting that it actually is affordable.
Yeah, definitely. And that was a strategic price point on our part, because our goal is to help as many millennials as we can,
Right,
so we can
millennials are
eradicate. Yes, we are. But our goal is to eradicate the leadership crisis by starting early with data and under pressure. So we have to make it accessible to millennials.
Right, of course, and that's really important. But I want to go back to the leadership thing a little bit. So you said that a lot of companies aren't training leaders, but what made you figure that out? Like, just based on your client's experience with companies, you realized that they're not training them properly.
So that's Nancy's baby, the
Right.
spot and leadership theory. So she went and did her master's in leadership, which I
Right.
didn't even know you could focus on. And she also has 25 years experience in corporate in leadership positions. So she was a highly sought after leader at everywhere she went. And, she had, as most of us, if not all of us have, had experienced the cardboard cutout leader, where they just, like I said, they have high anxiety, or, don't take feedback well, that sort of thing, and they alienate their team. And so she spent years studying this and in the field, and talking to clients, talking to other people that she knows, gathering this qualitative data to build the spot and leadership theory.
So what do you think companies can do to kind of fix that problem? Like, send their employees away to like leadership training programs, or send them to you guys? Like,
there is so much noise in this sphere.
I'm just curious as to how they can fix the problem themselves,
Absolutely.
like internally instead of externally, right?
Definitely. And there's something insane, like $50 billion spent on leadership every year, and 77% of executives don't feel it's effective. And so you're just throwing money at the problem, and it's not going away.
Yeah, I think that's the problem right there. Like, a lot of companies don't realize there is a problem.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. And what's happening is, since they and it's not the fault of the company, there's just so much noise out there, and how do you cut through that? So a lot of companies, what they do is they spend money on the problem reactively. So they spend money and time, and send their executives away to leadership training, and they're amped up for a week after, but nothing really comes of it, because it's reactive. They're already in leadership positions. So what a company could do is start with instead of just a top-down approach, so starting with your CEOs and your executives and having them pass the message on, is do a top-down, bottom-up approach, which is what we do at Empower. So starting with, of course, the CEO, the decision makers, of course, and explaining the process, and then also starting at the same time with the coordinators and the interns. There's so much value in that. And I mentioned personalized talent development plans, and of course, if you spent time with each millennial creating that talent development plan, you're going to have to hire somebody specifically to do that. So giving them the power, giving them the processes, and identifying their strength with data in relation to other people is incredibly valuable, because they can build their own plans that way and become more effective members of the corporate.
So I know when we were talking about the phone before this episode, you were saying how you're not a fan of 9-to-5 jobs. Why is that? If you don't mind talking about it.
Of course, yeah. So again, with personalization being absolutely key in this day and age, some people a 9-to-5 works perfectly. They want that home-life balance. Work-life balance. And, they want a 9-to-5, and they're happy with that.
Yeah.
For me and Nancy at Empower, it really just didn't work. So for me, I don't like the 9-to-5, but I think if I had to be in a 9-to-5, as long as I was in a situation where I had a good leader, loved what I was doing, I'd be okay with it. But where you can take it a step further is when you know yourself so well and you know how you work, it makes it a little bit obsolete. So an example is that I do all of the creative for Empower, so web design and make pitch decks and that sort of thing. And I need to be at home to do that.
Right.
I need to be at home with a mindless TV show on the background.
I'm the exact opposite.
Really?
I cannot get anything done at home.
So I did find that when I would work in
Yeah.
accounting, because I was like, oh God, detailed numbers, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
like can't focus.
Yeah.
But I get so in the zone with the creative that I can't have anybody around me who's going
Right.
to interrupt my
Right.
thinking and my
And this
my
is when
process.
you're at home.
Yes, yeah, at home. But if we talk about strategy, Nancy and I are both very high in intellectually expressive
Right.
and strategic. So we work very well in strategic thinking in person, and we need to do that together. So it's just understanding how you work and where you
Right.
work best, and then being able to articulate it, and then being able to deliver results as well.
See, that's interesting because, like, for me, in order to get the most work done, I need to be in a working kind of environment. So that's why home doesn't work for me, because there's so many distractions everywhere. You know, you have TV, you know, you can go downstairs and grab something from the fridge. Like, there's just limitless distractions for me, so that, you know, when I'm in an office and I'm working, there's people around me who are working as well. So I focus and get stuff done.
Yeah.
So it's just that's how it works for me. But it's interesting how it's the exact opposite for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just speaks to how different each individual client is, I guess, that even that you deal with in Empower, right?
Definitely.
Everyone has different strengths, different, you know, levels of comfort.
Yeah, and different
stuff like
habits.
that. Yeah. So if we wouldn't, sorry, just before we wrap up here, what's the underlying goal of Empower? Like, let's go like 10, 15 years in the future. Like, what is your vision of the world? You know, how has Empower changed it, right?
We want to build the generation of leaders that are the most self-aware.
Okay. And if you go a little bit more deeper into that, like,
So building leaders that understand how to be proactive in building their teams instead of reactive to a crisis.
and like, what is that going to change overall?
I think it'll change what we think at Empower. We think it's going to lead to a generation of collaboration. It's going to lead to a generation that's higher in creative problem solving, better at communication, lower self-critical, faster decisions, all the sort of things that you need when we're, you know, continuing down this highly technological advanced pathway.
And I think it's like schools should focus more on building leadership skills for their students. Like, even high schools should have leadership. I don't know.
Yeah.
They might have leadership classes. I'm not sure. I know mine didn't. But I mean, I think some universities have leadership courses, but maybe not enough.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And just even, well, that's, you know, down the future.
Right.
One of the reasons I got into this is I used to work at Skills Canada and worked with young people to, you know, remind them that the skilled trades are a very valid career pathway.
Right.
And even just my own story
They
of
pay
going
well, too.
into, oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, so you earn to learn,
Yeah,
right? Earn while
seriously.
you learn. But yeah, you know, if I had something like this, I would never have gone into medical.
Right.
And if Nancy had something like this, she would never have gone into law. And we laugh about that all the time because she's 5% action focused. 5 is very low for detail orientation. She wouldn't have read it. And she hates debate. So,
Yeah.
you know, she would have been a terrible lawyer and I would have been a very bored doctor.
So maybe there'll be a future where your company goes to schools and does this evaluation with students, so
Yeah.
that they find out in grade 9 what they should be pursuing
Yeah.
throughout high school and university.
Stay tuned.
How much of a change would that make?
Absolutely.
Wow, like that would be like a huge change. You know, if everyone was doing what they're meant to be doing, imagine that world. You know,
Yeah.
people would love their work. You know, and there'd be less stress, there'd be less depression. I'm sure, like, it'd be a whole chain reaction, right?
Yeah. And we don't just imagine it, we work towards it.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. This is a really valuable episode and definitely something that you guys should look into if you're looking at trying to find your strengths, you want to become a better leader. And also, before we sign off, how can people get in contact with you guys to kind of, you know, book these appointments, I guess?
Sure, thank you. So our website is empowerperformance.ca. Empower is spelled MPWR, and you can find me on LinkedIn, Maryl Eva.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much, Meryl.
Thank you.